you, Schengen. Excellencies, honorable ministers, heads of institutions, members of the diplomatic corps, esteemed colleagues at IFPRI, ladies and gentlemen. Well, let me start by thanking Schengen Fan for his invitation to address you today and for your very kind words. I least expected that you would say, in a way, I'm your mentor. We are colleagues, actually. I've been colleagues for almost more than a decade, actually. My organization, IFAD and IFPRI, have been partners for a long time. Our mandates go hand in hand, driving us to help create a world free of hunger and malnutrition. Since 1995, IFAD has funded more than a dozen of IFPRI's research projects, and the results of which we have seen out in the field and other projects, not only to strengthen IFAD's own programs on the ground, but also to inform global research agenda. I would also like today to acknowledge IFPRI's leadership with Compact 2025. Schengen reminded me how this whole initiative was born, maybe not delivered, but born or delivered, I think in 2014 in Chennai. A world free of hunger in 9 years is quite ambitious, visionary, but most important, I believe it is challenging. But also, I'm very proud to be associated and to push forward this goal as a member of the Leadership Council. But for today, I would want to reflect on how we can accelerate progress and end hunger and malnutrition. We all know the numbers: 800 million women, children, and men are critically undernourished. Another 160 million children are stunted because of early malnutrition. Now, the irony is that we know how to grow enough food to feed every person, every woman, every child, and every man, and to create wealth and end poverty. So the question is, what are we not doing correctly to end hunger and undernutrition once and for all? I think, first of all, to answer this question, we need to ask ourselves, who are those who go hungry and malnourished? Where do they live? What is their livelihoods like? Now, without question, poverty and hunger are most prevalent in the rural areas of developing countries. And 3/4 of the world's poorest people live in the developing world. And over 80% are in rural areas. Now, of the estimated 3 billion people who live in these rural areas, about 2/3 live in small farm households, ironically producing 80% of the food in developing countries. Now, isn't this a cruel paradox that so often it is the same farmers and their families that feed the world are the first to go hungry? Now, I do believe that if we can enhance the food security of smallholders and improve the nutrition of their families, we will reach a huge proportion of the hungry and malnourished. When given a chance around the world, we have seen at IFAD that smallholders are helping to strengthen food security and leading agricultural growth. In fact, when they are included in the development planning as equal partners, not just as recipients of aid, they can help transform their communities and, by implication, their countries. Now, this is a key message that comes out of our recently published Rural Development Report 2016 by IFAD. In this study, we looked at more than 60 developing countries. And we asked the questions: how does the nature, pace, and direction of changes in the rural space relate to a country's overall economic development? What does this mean for our efforts to improve the lives and livelihoods of rural people? The report shows that poverty generally falls as rural transformation takes place. But even then, this is not just given. What does this mean? That it is not enough for investment to flow into rural areas. Laws and regulations must also be in place to safeguard smallholders' access to land and the rights of local people. Policy. Only in this way can we be sure that economic growth and increased production result in less poverty, better nutrition for the poorest and the hungriest of our planet. As we implement Compact 2025 agenda, we must ask ourselves, are we paying enough attention to smallholders? Are we engaging them in finding solutions to end hunger and undernutrition? And if not, why not? What is their source of livelihood? Agriculture. What kind of agriculture? Small-scale agriculture. Smallholders are also, ironically, they are not only the single largest group of farmers in the world, they are the biggest source of on-farm investment in agriculture. And as a recent document I saw from the World Bank puts it, they are the largest private sector group in agriculture. Largest private sector group. This is no small matter. We believe that if we can harness the tremendous potential of smallholders, if we can empower them with knowledge and skills, if we can stem the flow of young people to the cities by making agriculture a highly profitable economic activity, then we lay the foundation for a world free of hunger and undernutrition, a world with thriving local economies. So what can we do to accelerate progress? Let me propose 4 value propositions to you. First, we must build inclusive partnerships. What does this mean? Traditional public-private partnerships are not enough because simply they ignore the producers themselves. So at IFPRI, we work towards building the 4 Ps: public, private, producer, partnerships. And the emphasis is on producers. They are the center of the partnership. And through this kind of partnerships, governments can create favorable policy environments and provide the infrastructure for rural business to thrive. Through these partnerships, we can build relationships between organized small-scale producers and the private companies, fair relationships that ensure smallholders, and especially women, are not excluded, or exploited, or marginalized. Second proposition, we must invest in rural infrastructure, including storage facilities, electricity, energy, roads, and social services. Now just imagine that in sub-Saharan Africa, 20 to 40% of all crops or produce are lost after harvest because farmers cannot have safe storage. Now, do you expect the farmer who is losing 40% of his produce to invest in growing an improved variety, in using fertilizers, in better irrigation after harvest when he's going to lose his produce to rodents and poor transportation? So building rural infrastructure makes communities more resilient. It makes the rural space attractive for youth, and this is vital, both to encourage young people to become farmers and to discourage them from migrating into cities, into crowded urban areas, and most often migrating outside to Europe or the Americas. Number 3, third proposition, we need truly inclusive policies at all levels of the development process, at the community level and at the federal level. Let me give you one example. In most rural areas in Africa and South Asia, women rarely have secure land rights. As a result, they have less incentive to invest in their land and this contributes to a cycle of poverty and hunger. Now, I have an example from Ethiopia, where we help the communities in supporting the issue of land certificates to all women who are heading households, or in addition, for farmland, certificates of ownership are issued to both wife and husband. Now, with greater security, women were able to invest. They planted more perennial trees. They used soil and water conservation methods to increase productivity. And with high income, they were able to buy more food, raise poultry, cattle, send their children to school, and improve nutrition with diverse foods. Now, by owning assets, the women were recognized in their communities as leaders. And they were able to join in the administration of community activities. In actual fact, as I speak now, the project has benefited almost 500,000 women. Sorry, households, not just women. 500,000 households. My fourth and final proposition is that we need to measure our results not just by higher yields, but by reduced poverty, improved nutrition, and healthy ecosystems. Earlier this morning, I shared with the Compact 2025 Leadership Council of new approaches that IFPRI has developed to be able to measure impact in terms of poverty reduction, not using the very narrow, limited single factor $1.90 or $1.95, but in terms of accumulation of assets. Now, even when people become richer in the rural space, there is no direct line between higher productivity, income, and improved nutrition. But if it is done properly, investment in rural economies can help smallholders both to feed and to nourish their children, strengthen their food security in their communities, and contribute to growth and well-being of nations. And finally, let us understand that women and men do not live in laboratories. They live in a social and environmental context. So we must be able to respond to this, and if we want to accelerate progress. Now, I have just outlined to you 4 value propositions: more inclusive partnerships, investment in rural infrastructure, commitment to inclusive policies, particularly around gender issues, and fourth, more holistic measurement of results. This must be part of our compact as we move towards 2025. Of course, investing in rural people alone cannot transform nations. Transformation requires good governance, transparency, the rule of law, and accountability, strong institutions, and the protection of the rights of the most vulnerable, particularly women. Now, these changes will not come from Rome or from Washington. They must be cultivated from within the countries themselves. Now, from my science background, I know that every tree and every plant must be fully rooted in its own soil for it to flourish. The same applies to nations. The international community can support the process of change. However, indeed, we have a responsibility to do so. The decisions of policymakers today may largely determine who grows the food to feed our growing populations and how our food systems will be shaped for decades to come. That is why Compact 2025 and this seminar are so important. They keep the issues of hunger and malnutrition high on the global policy agenda and helps us to build momentum to reach the goals we all want and the goals that we all know are possible. Thank you very much.